folks, and welcome back to Dungeons and Drybrushing. Today we're going to be making some traps and stairs to match with our dungeon tiles. Now I've called this advanced dungeon tiles because this is going to use almost the exact same techniques and construction methods that were used in the dungeon tiles video. So if you're not familiar with that, you're going to want to check that out first. Alright, that said, these are pretty simple to make. They should fit in exactly with your existing tile set, and I'm going to be using both of the methods that I used in the previous dungeon tile video to try and make sets of stairs both up and down, as well as some traps. The reason for that is that this should be easily adaptable to any style of dungeon tile. So whatever it is you've decided to use on your home table, these should be able to be adjusted to fit. Now if you have any questions about that, do feel free to leave them in the comments and I can try to help you get your tiles adjusted for what works on your table. Alright, let's get started. To start with, I just made a few standard 3x3 dungeon tiles. This was following the exact method from my other video linked below. I'm going to begin by making an XPS tile into an acid trap. I use the handle of my wire brush to trace the hole that I want to cut in the center of the tile, but you can use anything for this that just happened to be the width that I wanted. After that, I use a sharp knife to cut out the hole. You want a sharp blade here, and you want to go slow and just make repeated passes to get the cuts as clean as possible. Mine were a little messy, so I did use the knife after to clean them up too. The next step is texturing. I'm using a tinfoil ball for this, but you're going to want to texture the stone however you did it on your own tile set so that it matches. That said, this is one of the cheapest and easiest methods for this, so I do recommend it. Our acid trap is going to need a back, and nothing works better for this than cardstock. It's sturdy, and it's also so thin that adding it to the height of the tile doesn't make a noticeable difference to its thickness on the table, which is perfect. While you could go out and buy cardstock, food packages make a reliable source for this material. As always, tacky glue is our friend. Whatever glue you're using though, you want to make sure you're using quite a bit of it. I use epoxy for the acid effect later, and this is the first step in making sure that it can't leak out of the seam. The next step can actually be skipped and you can still get a great outcome. But just for a little visual flair, I take a couple of googly eyes in different sizes and glue them to the inside of the acid pit. These are going to be turned into acid bubbles later on. I base coat everything with black Mod Podge, but really, you're going to want to do whatever you did for your dungeon tiles. Whatever paint process and scheme you used there, use here. Because this is going to be going along with the Dungeon Basics tiles from the other videos, that means a base coat of dark gray, a dry brush in a light gray, and a coat of homemade black wash. But while I'm doing that, I also paint the inside of the acid pit yellow. You don't have to do this unless you're using the googly eyes though. The epoxy is going to be largely opaque, so there's no need to paint the inside of the trap if you don't want to. Once all of that is dry, I can move on to the exciting step that actually brings it all together. This is a cheap epoxy resin. While availability is going to vary place to place, this, or something like it, can usually be picked up quite cheaply at the dollar store. It's good stuff if you can find it for a low price. You can mix paint into it easily and it's easy to work with. But there are a few notes. You've only got a couple of minutes to work with this once the chemical reaction starts, so make sure you know exactly what you want to do and that you have all of your tools out and ready to be used before you begin. You don't want to be frantically looking for the right color of paint to tint it with while it's already curing. Second is that it gets extremely hot while the chemical reaction is going on. Don't touch it, and don't leave it on anything that can be damaged by heat. Now this includes your cutting mat. The epoxy will actually bubble and damage your mat. And finally, as you can see, the epoxy is quite thick. While it does flow a little bit, you're basically going to have to push it into place where you want it. I set that aside to dry in a spot where the heat won't be an issue, and then move on to making a spike trap. For the spike trap, I'll use the styrofoam plate style tiles that I demonstrated before, but this is all really interchangeable. You can make the spike trap out of XPS and the acid trap out of styrofoam. It really doesn't make a difference that way. I construct the tile in the same method as before, with the only difference being that I cut a hole in the top 2 layers of styrofoam. The bottom layer I leave in place. It's going to be the bottom of our spike pit. Once the hole is cut, I glue the top 2 layers to the third one to complete the tile. Then it's time for paint. Once again, you'll want to do this however you did your original tile set. So for the dungeon basic tiles, that's Mod Podge, a base of dark gray, a dry brush of lighter gray, and black wash. Once that's dry, it's time to add our spikes. For that, I'm getting out some toothpicks and I'm just going to cut the ends off of them, glue them in place, and press them into the foam a little bit. Toothpicks are another really cheap craft item that you can get a lot of use out of without really any expense. I bought a giant container of them for, I think, $3 many years ago, and it's still pretty full. After that, they just get painted with a layer of silver craft paint. I also give them a light dry brush of orange just to give them a bit of a rust effect. With the spikes done, you can get a little creative if you want to. There are lots of things you could add to the bottom of your spike pit. I've got a few of these around, some with bloodstains or heavier rust or dirty, nasty old water, but for this one I decided to go with just some rotted old plant matter. For now, I'm just going to set that aside so that we can move on to crafting stairs. First, you need to cut a small frame off 3 sides of a standard dungeon tile. The exact size, it doesn't really matter here. From there, I take the center piece and split it into 3 smaller pieces with my foam cutter. Now this absolutely can be done with a knife, but it's going to be tricky. Take your time and make sure your blade is sharp. This is what you're left with once it's been split. I use a tinfoil ball to texture the pieces before putting it together. Some of the angles of the stairs will be hard to reach once it's assembled, so it's better to do it now. Once all the pieces are textured, I take the first step and glue it back into the frame. This will be the bottom step of the stairs. Now to make the next step, I just take one of the other slices of foam and cut a strip off the end to make it smaller. After that, it gets glued in place atop the first one, and the process gets repeated for the last step, making it even smaller and gluing it in on top. I set all of that aside to dry, and just move on to making the other set of stairs. That way, it can all be painted at once. For the stairs down, I'll use styrofoam plates again, starting by making a 3x3 tile exactly as before. Once the glue is dried, I use the same method as I did for the spike and acid traps, and I just cut out a hole in the center of the tile, because I only glued around the edges. Once the center of the tile is cut out, it can be separated back into individual slices. And just like the other set of stairs, I cut them so that each one's just a little bit shorter than the one before it. They get glued together with tacky glue and slotted back into the tile that they came from.
Now with both sets of stairs constructed, they can be painted together too, and I'm pretty sure you already know where this is going. Paint them to match your tiles. For the dungeon basic tiles, that is, say it with me, a coat of Mod Podge, a coat of dark gray, a dry brush in light gray, and black wash.
Okay folks, that about wraps it up for the crafting part, but I do still want to talk about the final result that we got. I want to start by talking about the traps. One of the great things about crafting them this way is that these techniques are perfectly interchangeable whether you're using the XPS foam or if you're using dollar store foam or styrofoam plates like I demonstrated here. All of the techniques are easily transferable from one material to another, which is a great bonus. And of course, it's also fun that you can add personal touches to these, whether that's throwing in some weeds and overgrowth at the bottom of your traps, or you could fill the spike trap with swamp water using the exact same epoxy and technique that we used for the acid trap. You know, alternately, if you want to go a little more grim with things, you could add skulls or even body parts floating in the traps, whatever it is that works for your campaign and your setting. Alright, let's move on and talk about the stairs. So once again, the techniques here are completely interchangeable, but obviously for something like stairs you get a lot more verticality from the XPS foam. This lends a greater sense of depth, whether the stairs are supposed to be going up or down. This just makes it seem more realistic and makes it pop more. Of course, another great technique in addition to that is that these are good for more than just marking where your stairs are on your dungeon map. You can actually use them to bring verticality to combat maps and have sets of stairs you can go up in the middle of a fight to have your characters fighting on different levels from each other. Just make things a little more dynamic and fun. Of course, if you are going to be using these stairs that way, you're going to want to make them in batches. It saves yourself time and it makes sure that all of your sets of stairs turn out more or less the same and they match each other and make sense in relation to each other and to the dungeon you put them in. Thank you for watching. Now, if you've liked this, please hit like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments. It helps me know what kind of content to keep making in the future, but it also supports the channel. If you'd like other ways to support the channel, there are links below to buy me a coffee or to an Amazon wishlist for products that I'd like to use on the channel. And a huge thank you to everyone who's already chosen to do that. It really does mean a lot to me. Now, if there are other topics you'd like to see covered in Dungeon Basics, please let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to take a crack at just about anything that any of you want to see or need help with. Also, let me know if any of you would be interested in a series of videos kind of showing how to take these same projects and bring them to the next level, like a Beyond Basics series, something like that. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and thanks to those of you who have already hit like and have already subscribed. It means a lot to me, and hopefully, I'll see you all in the next one.